policy to drastically overhaul the way property investors are able to use negative gearing. Labor argues that as well as making it easier for first home buyers to get into the market, the changes would improve the budget bottom line. But a report out today is sounding an alarm, as Carrington Clark reports.
Ready to go.
Let's go.
We're ready to go.
Ready to go, darling?
Jordan Bill and wife Belinda live in a rented house in Toowoomba, southern Queensland, with their 2 children. But they also have a mortgage on an investment property about 10 minutes away from where they live.
We wanted a self-funded retirement. We didn't want to be on the pension or relying on the government. Come that retirement years, we wanted to take control ourselves.
Their investment property is negatively geared, which means the cost of owning the property, including loan repayments, is more than they receive in rent.
That colour there.
They then offset that loss against other income. The Labor Party wants to remove negative gearing for new investors buying existing properties. That won't directly affect Jordan and Belinda, but they're worried the value of their house could drop.
I think it's just an added pinch point that we don't need at the moment. It's just pushing us towards pulling that housing market price back. We're going to get lower and lower prices.
Louis Christopher from SQM Research was previously in favour of curbing negative gearing, but he now says Labor's changes will hit a property market already weakening. He says property prices could drop by a further 12%.
They're going to fall because investors are going to demand some type of discount for the lack of tax concession they once had.
But he says it's not just property owners who'll feel the pinch, but tenants may find themselves forking out more rent.
It's fair to say that prices are going to fall, and that will help in some respects with affordability. But on the other side of it, when we get into year 2 and year 3, we're likely to see a reduction in rental affordability.
Shadow Treasurer Chris Bowen rejects the findings of the report.
I agree with the Treasury analysis. The Treasury has said the impact of Labor's policies would be modest. We've always said that.
Back in February 2016, when opposition leader Bill Shorten announced Labor's policy, the property market was running hot.
Labor will help level the playing field for first home buyers competing with investors. And we will put the great Australian dream back within the reach of the working and middle class Australians who've been priced out of the housing market for too long.
Labor announced that negative gearing would only be available for newly constructed homes, and the capital gains discount would be halved from 50% to 25%. 3 years on, the Australian property market is in a very different state, with foreign investment down and tighter lending standards cooling the market. House prices have had their worst slide since the GFC, falling more than 5% nationally last year. Add to that the Reserve Bank's warning that a glut of apartments in Sydney and Melbourne are sowing the seeds of a further decline in prices.
The risk is that it just adds to the perfect storm around the property market, adds to uncertainty and pushes property prices down even further.
I want to make sure that the tax system, which is the federal government responsibility, is working to put first home buyers on a more level playing field. The tax department, the tax system, should not support somebody buying their 5th, 6th or 7th house more than it supports somebody buying their first.
In Hobart, the property market is bucking the national trend, with prices still rising. Brianna Woolnough and Michael Morgan are taking part in their usual Saturday ritual, hunting for a potential first home.
Would you be open to living that far out?
Yeah, definitely. I think we've just got to think a bit outside the box.
They've been looking for a year, but keep losing out to cashed-up investors.
I'm definitely more the worrier. I worry about what our situation will be down the track in 6 months, 12 months. I worry we won't be able to get in. I worry about who we're competing with.
Yeah, for us, buying a house means that we can have the flexibility of having kids and not worrying about it, or even having pets. Like, it's much more of an issue being in a rental property and trying to have those freedoms.
Hey,
How you going? Welcome.
With Hobart's rental vacancy rate super low, rents are going up. which makes it attractive to investors.
Yeah, this is nice.
We've just been blown away. So over the last 2 weeks, we've had over 20 groups through.
That's nice, isn't it?
Rihanna and Michael are happy that Labor's proposed changes to negative gearing might make houses like this less attractive to investors. But interestingly, so too are the current owners of the property. Siska and Anthony Hocking are also happy that the changes could make property more affordable.
All our kids at the moment are trying to get into the market, you know, so just because we can take advantage of it, I guess, you know, go us, but I still wouldn't. I'd still rather vote for in favour of the first home buyer and what they're up against.
Even with the recent price falls, Australian property is still very expensive. For a typical Australian family back in the 80s and early 90s, they could buy an average house for between 3 to 4 times annual income. Today, to make the same purchase would take 5 to 6 times annual income. And with stagnant wages, the only way affordability improves is if house prices go down.
If we're in an environment where the property market is under a lot of downwards pressure, one of the last things you want to do is add to that downwards pressure to the extent that it may adversely affect the broader economy. Yeah, we all want more affordable housing. Even I think it's unfair that young people have to pay this much for houses, but we don't want that increase in affordability to come so quickly that it damages the economy.
Before the election, we'll announce exactly what date this policy will commence from, and importantly, every investment, every property owned by people today is fully grandfathered, not impacted by the changes.
Carrington Clark with that report. Amidst the political fallout in Australia from the Christchurch massacre, debate is raging about whether anti-Islamic sentiment has been fanned or exploited in mainstream politics, notably by senior coalition MPs. What was said during a discussion in the Abbott Shadow Cabinet in 2010 and what the now Prime Minister Scott Morrison may have contributed has become a big issue. Chief Political Correspondent Laura Tingle reports.
It was Harmony Day today in Australia, a day to spread the message that everyone belongs. A powerful message after a week of introspection in politics in the wake of the Christchurch massacre. 8 years ago, Scott Morrison attended Harmony Day celebrations in equally difficult circumstances.
It's an absolute disgrace that you will quibble about a little bit of money for a funeral.
2 days earlier, victims of a shipwreck on Christmas Island, which claimed up to 50 lives, had been buried in Sydney. The then Shadow Immigration Minister had created a political storm by saying the then government's decision to fly relatives from Christmas Island for the funerals showed it didn't understand the value of taxpayers' money.
When it comes to the question of do I think this is a reasonable cost, then my honest answer is no, I don't think it is reasonable.
His comments provoked a bitter split in the Shadow Cabinet.
From my perspective, I would never seek to deny a parent or a child from saying goodbye to their relative.
But it did not stop there. Clearly incensed by Mr Morrison's comments, someone in the Shadow Cabinet leaked the details of a discussion held 2 months earlier, in December 2010. The claim was that Mr Morrison had urged his colleagues to, quote, capitalise on the electorate's growing concerns about Muslim immigration. As 7:30 reported on Monday night, exactly what Mr Morrison said that day is a matter of great contention, with different recollections of what exactly was said and what was Mr Morrison's intention. At the time, Mr Morrison initially only declined to comment on the story. Later, he said,
"The gossip reported today does not reflect my views."
With the controversy re-emerging this week in a debate about political dog-whistling against Muslims, the question of what was said was re-prosecuted, with 2 current Cabinet Ministers, Peter Dutton and Greg Hunt, denying Mr Morrison had suggested the coalition should exploit anti-Muslim sentiment.
The problem with that is that Greg Hunt did not attend the meeting.
7:30 has once again contacted members of the then Shadow Cabinet about this story. A number continue to assert that while Mr Morrison may not have explicitly said the coalition should, quote, capitalise on the matter, his intention was clear, reflecting a sentiment expressed by one source to the Sydney Morning Herald in 2011 as, quote, he put it on the table like a dead cat. Amid the conflicting claims, the Prime Minister has become notably more aggressive in his denials.
It is an ugly and repugnant lie. I reject it absolutely, 100%.
However, the fact that he said something was actually publicly confirmed at the time. Seeking to defend Mr Morrison, Liberal frontbencher Andrew Robb said,
"What Morrison was saying is that there were these perceptions in some parts of the community and that they were becoming a problem and had to find some constructive way to deal with it before it became worse."
The revived controversy over that 2010 Shadow Cabinet meeting and reminders of Mr Morrison's comments about the shipwreck victims' funerals all illustrate how the debate has changed in the wake of Christchurch. The question for the federal election is whether Australians will heed our political leaders' messages this week about an end to tribalism and less dog whistling, or will splinter again.
A short time ago, the Prime Minister sat down for a half-hour interview with Waleed Ali on Channel 10 and they addressed the Cabinet meeting. Here's a little of their exchange.
And I was very concerned about these issues and the way people were feeling in the community.
So when you raised those issues in that meeting, what did you say about them?
Well, I was concerned that we needed to address them, which is what I've been doing inside and outside of the Parliament for the last 10 years of my life.
Address those concerns?
Yes, to lower them.
So what your argument was in that Shadow Cabinet meeting was...
Yeah, I was acknowledging that there were these fears in the community and that we had to address them, not exploit them, actually seek to try and address them.
Laura Tingle's with me now from Parliament House. Laura, did this exchange shed new light on anything?
Well, I think it did, Lee. It made clear that what the Prime Minister is denying is that he was trying to escalate the issue, not that it wasn't discussed. But what it didn't clear up was if he was trying to look at ways that the issue should be de-escalated, why the discussion was subsequently closed down with at least two people, including Julie Bishop, who was chairing the meeting, saying, well, we don't need to discuss this further because we have a non-discriminatory policy on immigration. And I think the Prime Minister has left open a whole new area of difficulty for himself because under repeated questioning he continues to rule out the idea of putting One Nation last on all how to vote cards, and that's even while acknowledging that One Nation has talked about Islam as being like a disease against which we have to vaccinate ourselves. So it's clarified the technicalities of the discussion, but it hasn't really answered all the issues.
OK, Laura Tingle, thank you.
Thanks, Lee.